Once you start waking up from the hypnotic trance of the official lie, the word they is often used to lay blame on the perpetrators. This is usually followed by the question, who are they? According to ancient history, religion, mythology, and occult tradition, they are not human, and they have been manipulating humanity from the shadows for millennia. The Gods of Eden by William Bramley does an excellent job of tracing this back through all of recorded history. But let's just start from the late 19th century. Just over a century ago, it was known that giants with red hair and double rows of teeth once inhabited America. These 9-foot-tall giants were written about casually in 1874 by Abraham Lincoln. A few years later, the Smithsonian Institute began confiscating giant mummies and skeletons by the thousands. In 1886, the exclusive Jekyll Island Club was founded and built upon an ancient burial site of the Timucua tribe, who were said to be giants. In 1910, the Federal Reserve banking conspiracy was hatched on Jekyll Island between the Rothschild banking dynasty and the Rockefeller family, whose cabin there was known as Mound Cottage and said to have been built upon a sacrificial altar. These powerful families worked together to hide the truth of our mysterious past, and they built a modern society with poison to keep us dumb and lies to keep us confused. The Rothschild dynasty and the Federal Reserve banking system funded all sides of the First and Second World Wars, which paved the way for the creation of the United Nations in 1945. Funded by the Rockefellers, the UN was the beginning of today's de facto world government. The Nuremberg trials resulted with only 12 sentenced to death and 7 sent to prison. The majority were allowed to professionally continue their criminal activities. Nazis who were tried for medical experiments involving cruelty and murder were later brought into Big Pharma through Operation Paperclip, and an entire team of Nazi rocket scientists were brought in to start NASA. While the Nuremberg trials may have been mostly theater, they had their revelations. It was revealed that the Nazi eugenics program stemmed from organizations in America funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and its offshoots. And it was revealed that many high-ranking Nazis believed they were in contact with an alien race known as the Aryans, the same mythical race that allegedly created Hinduism as it is known today. While many Hindu scholars dismiss the claim, the Nazis believed it. It is why they adopted the popular Hindu swastika. They also studied the Vedas, and their most classified project, the Bell, had the same design as the Vimana spacecraft described in these ancient texts. In 1971, a young Klaus Schwab, son of a Nazi nuclear scientist, was placed as the head of what is now known as the World Economic Forum by his mentor, Henry Kissinger. In 1974, Rockefeller protege Henry Kissinger wrote National Security Memorandum 200 for the United Nations. This is popularly known as the Kissinger Report and is one of the foundational documents of the depopulation agenda unfolding today, with Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum acting as the tip of the spear. And so who are they? Several will say it's the Rothschild family, but they seem to work for the crown. Others argue that the Vatican holds more sway. Many people insist it's the Jesuits, and some swear it's the Jews. According to occult records, a character named Sanat Kumara rules over the world from inside the earth, along with a group known as the Great White Brotherhood, 7 in total. Helena Blavatsky says these 7 Kumaras are the same as the 7 Dhyanis, the 7 archangels, and the 7 Elohim, the 7 representing the 7 sisters, also known as the Pleiades star cluster. NASA, which was started by Nazis, Freemasons, and Satanists, has been obsessed with both Pleiades and Orion ever since the Apollo moon missions. According to hundreds of alien abductees, that is where most aliens claim to be from. 2 different factions, one to help liberate humanity and the other to enslave us. It is the oldest story on Earth, good versus evil, the darkness and the light, the white hats and the black hats. It is a struggle within each one of us and is unfolding in the world around us for all to see. A more beneficial inquiry might be, who am I?
Hey everybody, welcome back. You're seeing part 2 of Khazarian Mafia, The God Eaters. I welcome you. I'm sure that you've already seen part 1. Part 1 was a big hit. I cannot believe how many people watched part 1. I don't know I don't know why that was the case, but I guess I hit a nerve with this. So I'm happy about that, and I'm really hoping that today we can cover some amazing ground. I have some awesome information that, had I known this kind of thing much earlier in my life, I would have made such better decisions for myself. I spent so many years involved in a belief system, and it really messed up my thinking. It really messed up how I understood the world. And I mean, I guess it's a good way to start off, but 3 gentlemen were critical and instrumental in my recovery, in getting out of a system of belief. Those 3 men were Terence McKenna, Dr. Joseph Campbell, and Alan Watts. And actually today, I'm going to open up with a little story from Alan, because these guys, those 3 gentlemen, were so helpful to me in my life. They'll be helpful to us today as we cover some ground that's going to be extremely challenging. I kind of have to calm down. My heart is really racing right now because there's a lot of really amazing information coming, and I can't rush it. I have to be very calm. So in a lecture that Alan gave years ago, he's since passed away, but in a lecture that he gave years ago, he told a story of a woman who approached him and said to him that she was deathly afraid of black widow spiders. And she wanted to know how to cure her fear. And Alan said to her, well, there's really only one way to cure your fear, and that is to learn about, to know what you're afraid of, because it's what we don't know that causes fear. It's what we don't understand and don't know that causes fear. And so he said, I want you to go to the library, and I want you, this is back before the internet, I want you to, he said to the lady, I want you to go to the library, and I want you to get every single book you can find on black widows, every single picture book, every single scientific book, every single book that you can find on black widow spiders. And I want you to read everything, look at everything, and I want you to spend days, weeks, months if you need to learn everything there is to know about black widow spiders. Okay, I guess she was a local, because he said she came back to him at another lecture later on. He was down in San Francisco where he did most of his work. He lived on a ferry boat, which is awesome because that ties into Buddhism, but I can't get carried away with that stuff. So he was at another lecture, and she came back to him, and she said, you're not going to believe this, but I not only am not afraid of black widow spiders anymore, I've actually started to collect them. And right there is a brilliant example of one of the greatest truths in philosophy, and that is, when you know yourself, you conquer all your fears, because you're no longer afraid, because you know who you are. And then, as well as things that you are afraid of that are outside of you, when you learn them, you conquer all your fears. And so today, that's a wonderful introduction to today, because today we're going to learn how to conquer our fear in regards to the Khazarian Mafia, and we're going to follow them from about where I left off last time. And by learning about them, we're no longer going to be afraid of them, and we won't be afraid of their symbolism. Some of the symbolism I have in here is pretty frightening, and so you'll need to learn about these things, to know these things, so that they're not frightening anymore, and they'll just become benign. They'll just become just another aspect of life, another characteristic of life, another experience in life that you come to know through experience. Okay, so, my goodness. So with that in mind, let's head over to my little time map here that I didn't spend hardly any time on. I spent so much time on this, I should have. But I want to recap a little bit of what we looked at so that we're all on the same page as to what's happening. Now, one of the best things to know when you begin to study history are the ages, the major ages. And so I have written them down here: the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and the Roman Age. And by knowing this order, this chronological order, you're going to better understand the events in history. And by better understanding these things, you can find the patterns. And by finding the patterns, man, that's how you understand something, and that's how you conquer fear. And just find the similarities, and it'll all begin to make sense to you. Okay, so going back to the beginning, this bloodline we've been tracing of the Khazarian Mafia, a number of the witnesses that I have watched and read testimonies of and so forth talked about how the Luciferians that preyed on them would claim their lineage back to the Amalekites. And so that's how Amalekite has continued to come up in my dialogue here with you, is because that's where I'm getting the evidence that I'm getting out of the videos I'm watching, the books that I'm reading, and all that I'm gathering to pull this stuff together. There's been a common theme of Amalek and the Amalekites. And this is Amalek, and as we saw in the last video, Amalek, this means liquors of blood. But what I want you to notice here on my timeline, and this is what all this has been building up to, is this 1 BC notation on this map I've got here. So you see in purple there 1 BC, and it says trade routes, China to Europe open. I'll never forget this, but years and years ago when I was fighting cancer, I was watching a lecture series by Dr. Joseph Campbell called Mythos. And he mentioned in that series that these trade routes that opened up between China and India and on into the West are what eventually destroyed Rome. And the reason why these trade routes eventually destroyed Rome is because these trade routes opened the path and gateway for the cynics, for the Eastern religions and principles that were brought into the West. And so you had these people that had migrated over, and they came in and they brought great challenge to the spiritual fundamental that was prevailing in Rome. And as anybody would know, if you destroy the prevailing spiritual notion of a group of people, that people will split apart. People die for their religions. People die for their belief systems. And so it's essential that any community of people is united. They are united in a spiritual sense, in a spiritual understanding that that particular culture has captured. Now, we all know in this age of information, we all know as time is moving on and so forth right now, that it's not a good idea to be in a hive mind. It's not a good idea to be locked down to one particular belief system. But what you have to understand is they had no internet at this time. Communication was hard to come by. And so what you knew was what your local community knew. And so if you break apart a city in their belief systems, in their spiritual system, who their gods are, what their traditions are, what their annual traditions are, what they celebrate, who they worship, all this kind of stuff, if you break that up, that society is doomed. And it was Dr. Campbell's contention that essentially, at the end of the day, it was the spiritual dissolving of Rome that eventually broke the thing apart. And then that combined with the corruption at the top of the scale, and that is our concern, the Khazarian Mafia. And they had already infiltrated Rome. And this is what isn't understood. And I've got some great videos I'm going to show you today. That's going to show you how we went from Rome and this ancient Iron Age and this brutality age and fighting and war age into this whole psychological, spiritual age that was birthed with the birth of the Roman Catholic Church in 325. And so what's really critical in understanding yourself and in understanding this group and history and so forth is bridging that gap. And in understanding those ancient peoples were the ones who formed modern society. Nothing happened or ended them. Their core corruption, the corruption that corroded and destroyed Rome is the same corruption that corroded and destroyed the Catholic Church, that is destroying the Catholic Church. It's the same corruption because all of these these groups worship the black sun. They are Satanists. And so whether they know it in that language or not is beside the point. The point being that is the spiritual center. That's the uniting point. That's the principle that undergirds the Khazarian Mafia is this Satanism, this Luciferianism, this black sun worship, Baal worship, the sacrifice of individuals, the sacrifice and consumption of children. This is all what underlies this group. And I'm trying to show you through this lecture is that it has always been that way. They have always been cannibals. This goes all the way back past the Canaanites. And it's past the Canaanites because it was the Canaanites who were communing with this evil to understand and learn this control system, this mind control system, this sadistic system of worship that controls societies and oppresses and sacrifices societies. Okay. And so what I'm trying to do here now is bridge that gap. So one of the critical elements, one of the veins that's going to bring you understanding are these trade routes. And if we look at our map here, I've superimposed this picture of Khazaria. Now to remind you, this is Khazaria. And as you see, it's right there between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, just north of the Caucasus Mountains, which is just north of the Levant. They're next to the Mediterranean, as I showed you in the last video. Now look, I've taken that picture here, you see? And I've taken that picture, and I've superimposed it, done my best to size it correctly, to not only show you the size of Khazaria, you see, but how the trade routes from India and China all pass through this area. Now what's critical to understanding in how the Khazarians gained wealth and power are the trade routes, because they were bringing the money. They were marauders. The Khazarians were marauders, and they not only had tolls and taxes that they levied on travelers that went through there, but they actually preyed on the families. And I told that whole story in the last one. No need to go into it because we have so much to cover today. And so they would prey on these families as they would pass through, and you could see right there, as they're passing through this area to get to the west, you cannot avoid Khazaria. You can't avoid it. It's right in the middle of things. And this is how, from 1 BC, we get to 100 AD, that 100 years between the trade routes opening and the beginning of Khazaria, as we find in this essay we're going to be reading today. It's during that time frame that this whole system develops, and Khazaria basically is born, because they have this unlimited supply of money that's coming through their travelers, human meat, human sacrifice, and then they take on the identity of those people and move into the West eventually. But they build a nation off of these travelers. Okay, and it gets so bad that eventually Russia forces them to choose between one of three religions, and that's what we're going to get to. But what I wanted to do in this essay was to tie together those trade routes opening and then the eventual birthing of Khazaria in 100 AD, and then that's going to carry us also through the birthing of the church that's coming up in another 250 or so years after 100 AD, and we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the symbolism. We're going to get into looking at Saturn and black sun worship and how this has translated into Western society, Western symbolism, Western religion. We're going to look at all of that, and this is all tied into these trade routes, the Khazarian Mafia, everything. It's going to be unbelievable. You guys are going to understand it all. Okay, so the basis of this lecture I'm giving you today is The Hidden History of the Incredibly Evil Khazarian Mafia by Mike Harris, PhD. Now, before we begin, understand that I've had to do some editing for time. I've timed this out, and I've come to almost 3 hours to do this lecture, and so that's completely crazy. So I have had to cut out some paragraphs, and what I've done is they're non-binding, meaning they're not paragraphs that destroy the point of the essay, which is to communicate the history of the Khazarian Mafia. They're like little ornamentations that go along with the essay to help you better understand. And so, having said that, it'd be a good idea to read it first before you watch this, so you get the whole thing first, and so you'll know the parts that I've skipped, and you'll know the paragraphs that I've had to omit simply for time. So understand, this isn't a word for word copy of the essay from Mike Harris. I have had to take out some sentences and some paragraphs to make this thing fit and to make it make sense to you in the amount of time that we have, which isn't much. Okay, the present-day Khazarian Mafia, KM, he uses the letters KM for Khazarian Mafia all through this, so that's what KM is. The present-day Khazarian Mafia, KM, knows that it cannot operate or exist without abject secrecy, and therefore has spent a lot of money having its history excised from the history books in order to prevent citizens of the world from learning about its evil beyond imagination that empowers the world's largest organized crime cabal. Now, what you've got to understand, let me make a little correction here. What you've got to understand is the reason why you don't know anything about the KM is because they have erased themselves from history. They have buried themselves in other histories. So just like Western religion appropriated pagan traditions and buried those pagan traditions underneath its umbrella of Western traditional spirituality, so nobody knows anything about the pagan history for the most part. Nobody knows that the annual rituals and the celebrations and so forth are based on pagan rituals. That's why Easter is still chosen by the moon. And so the average everyday Westerner has no idea that their symbolism is buried in paganism. Okay, and in the same way, when you look at history, buried underneath the history they've given you, you have no idea what actual history is, because the Khazarian Mafia have buried it under wars, have buried it under failed societies. And so what is lost is the true history, and you're given this pseudo-history that the Khazarian Mafia has basically indoctrinated you with, indoctrinated me with, us all, because we all were trained under their systems, and I've got a video for that too. I hope we have time for all the stuff that I've got coming. Okay, it was Mike Harris that connected the dots and made the actual discovery of the presence of the KM's secret history and blood oath to take revenge on Russia for helping Americans win the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, and their blood oath of revenge against America and Americans for winning these wars and sustaining the Union. I have underlined that for a very critical reason, and that is for you to know why, for the last however many decades, you have heard a constant repeating of Russia, 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 anti-Russia, Russia's the bad guy, Russia is evil, Russia is terrible, Russia is destroying the world, on and on and on it goes. Okay? And all of us were buried within that inculcated idea that Russia is the source of all evil. Now, what you need to understand is Russia played a critical war in keeping the Khazarian Mafia from taking over the world. They played a critical role in keeping the Khazarian Mafia from taking over the world. And we're going to outline that, but this hatred of Russia goes all the way back to when they told the Khazarian society, you're either going to worship one of these three religions or we're going to destroy you. And then they went in and destroyed them 100 years later, because they didn't stop. We're going to get to that. And that was the seed. The seed of hatred for Russia was born right there when Russia came in and destroyed ancient, original Khazaria, right there between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Okay, and drove them out and drove them into Bohemia. We'll get into that. Okay, so looking on our little timeline here, this is now past the timeline I had before. This is a new timeline, and I have the ages written down. You can see there at the bottom it says Dark Ages, Reformed Age, Industrial Age, and Modern Age. These are the ages, the themes that carry society through time. And they're underneath these themes because these are the prevailing technology, the prevailing force, the prevailing energy that is driving these societies. And that's why you have the Stone Age, the Iron Age, the Bronze Age. It is that metallurgy that's driving the power of that society. And so in the same way, you now have here in these next ages, look here, you have the Middle Dark Ages. What is happening in the Middle and Dark Ages? Knowledge is kept from the people. When you keep people outside of truth and outside of information, you keep them in the dark. And who drove the Dark Ages? The Catholic Church drove the Dark Ages because they hid the truth. They hid the truth that it is all within you. And they buried it. This is going to be getting into the stuff that's going to be really hard for a lot of people to hear. And I really hope I really hope you have the stomach and the perseverance to listen through this, because this is really critical in understanding how the Khazarian Mafia hid themselves, because they hid themselves within the Catholic Church.
In 313, Emperor Constantine proclaimed the Edict of Milan. The edict approved Christianity as a legal religion of Rome and gave legal privileges and immunity from military duty and taxes to the Christian clergy. There was the political goal of Constantine underlying such kinds of preferential treatment. It was Mithraism, the sun worship religion, that was diffused throughout Rome. But all the Roman emperors deified themselves and enforced people to worship them. Some of the nobility were fascinated by the Egyptian mystery religion. So, Rome suffered from religious dissension within itself. At this, Constantine tried to make the best use of Christianity that had spread throughout the whole region of Rome, despite all sorts of persecution. This was because he thought that Christianity could solidify his empire. By approving Christianity as a national religion of Rome, Constantine tried to seek the unity of the Roman Empire under one religion. Thanks to Constantine's pro-Christian policies, many believers of the polytheistic religions of Rome streamed into the Christian Church. This tightened Constantine's political grip, and Christianity positioned itself as the religion of Rome, expunging persecution and contempt it had received so far. However, the indiscreet conversion they did without having any kind of understanding or faith, rather produced an adverse effect, the influx of pagan customs into the church. Those who were tainted with polytheism of Rome looked as if they had converted, but in actuality it wasn't easy for them to get rid of the religious rites and institutions of worshipping the sun, the moon, and the stars, and various gods and goddesses, which they had worshipped since their forefathers. The church in Rome sought for solutions to disburden the pagans when they converted to Christianity. It was to bring in things similar to the gods that the pagans had believed into the church. They thought they would increase the number of pagan converts by doing that. For the Christian bishops introduced, with but slight alterations, into the Christian worship, those rites and institutions by which formerly the Greeks and Romans and others had manifested their piety and reverence towards their imaginary deities, supposing that the people would more readily embrace Christianity if they perceived the rites handed down to them from their fathers still existing unchanged among the Christians. To attract more pagans, the church in Rome tried to Christianize various kinds of pagan gods to suit the Bible. One of the most representative things among them was accepting pagan customs of the sun god worship tradition. The church in Rome identified Jesus with the sun god. Inside of the church was decorated with various kinds of sun images, and the idea to worship the sun was established as if it were the truth of the church.
Okay, so by knowing this, that the Khazarian Mafia hid inside the Catholic Church, it's important to understand not only why that happened, but how that happened. And that is exactly what this map and this lecture is going to begin to show you. AD 100, an incredibly evil society emerges in Khazaria. Khazarians developed into a nation ruled by an evil king who had ancient Babylonian black arts, occult oligarchs serving as his court. His priests, okay, it's my opinion that his priests, the Khazarian priest, or excuse me, the Khazarian leader, his court priests, magic men, shaman, were likely Amalekites. That's my opinion, because it's the Amalekites that were honing and learning more and more about the phyla, the pharmacological chemicals that are within the plant kingdom, which again comes out of Esau, the man of the field. Okay, so the Amalekites are carrying this magic, this hallucinogenic magic, this plant magic, this spiritual magic, this evil magic, straight out of Khazaria, or straight into Khazaria from the Levant. There's magic going on at the high echelon of these societies. You see it in Pharaonic Egypt, you see it now in Khazaria, and it was also in Babylon when Talmudism was developed, and they're running on human sacrifice this Babylonianism that is this dominator culture, war-oriented, consuming culture that is basically birthing these evil societies, okay? That's the timeline. That's the magic that prevails through these groups. During this time, Khazarians become known to surrounding countries as thieves, murderers, road bandits, and for assuming the identities of those travelers they murdered as a normal occupational practice and way of life. And that's the key to know. Like I said earlier, this was a way of life. This is how Khazaria was birthed. This is how the Khazarians empowered themselves, was through these practices. And these are evil practices. They're using the inherent evil that is within nature. There's as much evil as there is good. They're using that, and they're fomenting, fostering, they're culturing this evil so that they can build their society to control and basically own the world. So continuing, in AD 800, an ultimatum is delivered by Russia. Now looking here at the map, you can see, there it is, the Russian principalities. You see that? The Russian principalities are right above Khazaria, and it's Khazaria who is pilfering and eating and using and taking and stealing all the people that go into this land. So there are people in Russia that leak down into Khazaria, and they also get pilfered, and this happens repeatedly, and Russia knows, and China knows, about what is going on with these people that are passing through this land and how evil it is, okay? Okay. So 800 years later, remember the trade routes opened in 1 BC, 800, so 900 years later, or AD 800, so 800 years later, an ultimatum is delivered by Russia. The leaders of the surrounding nations, especially Russia, have had so many years of complaints by their citizens that as a group they deliver an ultimatum to the Khazarian king. They send a communique to the Khazarian king that he must choose one of the 3 Abrahamic religions for his people and make it his official state religion and require all Khazarian citizens to practice it and socialize all Khazarian children to practice that faith. The Khazarian king was given a choice between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. The Khazarian king chose Judaism and promised to stay within the requirements laid out by the surrounding confederacy of nations, led by the Russian Tsar. Now, this is going to get critical to understanding how they've hidden themselves, in that they have hidden themselves underneath this guise called the Ashkenazi Jew. And they are not practicing Ashkenazi Jews. They are practicing Babylonianism, Talmudism. That's what they practice. That's the spirituality they practice. They have put an umbrella to be in secret, to remain in secret, that they're practicing Ashkenazi Jews, that they've taken on the Abrahamic Jewish faith. That's what they say. What they're actually doing is practicing Satanism, but they're telling everyone, and they're appearing to everyone, that they're practicing one of the 3 Western religions. And again, look at the pattern. You see the same thing happen in the Catholic Church. They tell you that they're a Western religion that's embraced the idea of Jesus and forgiveness and sin and the remuneration of sin and so on and so forth. But underneath that umbrella is pure Satanism. Just like the tunnels that are underneath the Vatican, they were there long before there was the organized church. It's because these people were already practicing this down in the tunnels underneath, the caverns underneath the ground, because they have to remain in secret. They can't do these things out in the open. They have to do them in secret because they know if normal everyday folks that are not brainwashed with this Satan worship won't allow for it. They won't stand for it. People will stop it. So they know they have to hide it. Okay, so that's exactly what the Russian Tsar does. Okay, now looking here again at our map, you can see there the Russian principalities, they've given them warning, and this is what happens. Despite his agreement and promise, the Khazarian king and his inner circle of oligarchs kept practicing ancient Babylonian black magic, also known as secret Satanism. This Satanism involved occult ceremonies featuring child sacrifice after bleeding them out, drinking their blood. I put that in quotes because it's a literal statement. After bleeding them out, drinking their blood, and eating their hearts. The deep, dark secret of the occult ceremonies was that they were all based on ancient Baal worship, also known as worship of the owl. Now I'm going to begin to make a connection here for you. Now, worship of the owl. Have you all ever heard of a place called Bohemian Grove? It's a real place in Sonoma County. It's a real place. And it's a place where these people go to carry out fake sacrifices, because they obviously can't have real sacrifices there out in the open because it wouldn't be tolerated. And so they carry out fake sacrifices at this place as sort of a mock celebration of what they're doing, and it's a mockery of us. But what I wanted you to notice is, and to believe something as outlandish as what I just told you, first of all, look at these pictures. So we have the owl, and we know owl to these people is Baal, Molech. This is Satan, okay? They're putting a costume over the god they're actually worshiping. So they're worshiping Satan, but they can't have a giant Satan in this public park. So they anthropomorphize Satan into an owl. And why do they use Satan as the owl symbol? Because the owl is silent. The owl hunts at night. The owl can see at night. The owl is able to fly without making any noise. Owls, I don't know if you know this, but owls have little tufts of down on the ends of their plumage, so that as they fly through the air, the sharp plumage that causes turbulence doesn't cause turbulence because of the little soft down-like feathers that are on the edges of these feathers. And so they literally can fly without making one sound because there's no turbulent noise that comes off of their wings. Okay, these people love these kind of ideas. This idea that they can deceive others by secretly passing through the night, through the unknown, and capture people.
This is the United States of America, believe it or not. No, I have no idea how to draw. But it doesn't matter. What I'm going to tell you is this. We know where all the rat lines are and where they go. What is a rat line?
Traffic line.
It's a trafficking line.
What is it, a rat?
Rat.
This one actually splits.
Rat.
A rat line.
Known
Up the
traffic.
East Coast and up the Hudson River. There's actually 5 main trafficking lines. This one kind of goes mainly actually from Louisiana, Alabama, so Ford is like that. Right in here, there's another one that goes up. There's 5 trafficking lines in the United States, rat lines. What if I was to tell you something like this? I wasn't going to do this till Sunday. But what if I was to tell you that there is an attorney who has an office in Poughkeepsie, New York, and an office in Bellevue, Washington? Same attorney. And he's partnered with an attorney out of Bellevue and an attorney out of here. And what if I told you that out of this office, he created over 100 corporations to traffic children? I'm talking about entertainment companies that take pictures, lodging companies, short and long distance trucking companies, even an airline that's stationed at Boeing Field, offering companies. You have to have all elements of trafficking. So you have to have transportation, logistics, offerings, okay? 5x5 entertainment, Wild Child Entertainment. Corporations like that, he's set up. What if I told you he set them up under mostly aliases names, but we have the real names too? What if I told you he set them up for people who are police officers, county commissioners, and judges?
I believe it.
Okay?
I read Franklin cover up.
Now, what if I told you the same attorney in the state of New York owns 17 child protective services agencies in the state of New York? And he also owns 17 family courts. He owns the Spafford Center, which traffics children to Jerusalem and the United Kingdom. What if I told you I had pictures of 2 American boys with a Hezbollah boy over in Jerusalem carrying AK-47s, and one's 7 and one's 11, and I know where family they came from here in America? What if I told you in 1983 he bought a company from William Casey's law firm? The DOD guy's going to start scribbling here when I mention names. I'm serious. William Casey. Who was William Casey? He was the head of the OSS before it became the CIA. He was our first CIA director, and then he ran the SEC.
Securities and Exchange Commission?
Yes. And helped
They're stacked deep.
set up our whole birth certificate fraud thing. He also started the Spafford Center under a different name back in the 30s, and he died in 1975, and in 1983, this attorney bought it from Casey's law firm. It's a corporation sole. Does anybody know what a corporation sole is? It's a corporation that's started so old that it's grandfathered into under all laws. It's a powerful corporation. A corporation sole. It was owned by William Casey.
Wasn't Casey murdered? No.
I wish he was. Anyway, and he can take children out of New York City or any other county that he has one of his 17 agencies. He can show up at your house with a cop, kick in your door, his CPS agents, take a kid, jump you through a bunch of parental hoops, terminate your parental rights through his own judges and his own guardian ad litems and his own, and he's licensed by the state to do business. He's protected under the commerce laws. He's sanctioned by the state. When you run his name of his family services companies on Google, they come up higher than the actual state of New York's family services in the search engines. So if you're going to turn somebody into CPS and you Google it, good chance you're turning into a guy who set up hundreds of pedophile companies.
Because they do protect each other.
Now, what do you think about that?
And what I want you to notice is look at the age of these people. This is a sophisticated society. This isn't a bunch of 20-year-olds and teens that are going to dance around an owl in the middle of a park in Sonoma County. These are adults. Look at how they're dressed. They're wearing suits and ties. Look at and then notice, look at the face of the gentleman on the left there. Smug. They're giving you a smug look. Look at the third guy from the front sitting in the chair. Look at the way he's looking at the camera. It's a smug look. Same with the guy next to him. There's even a guy smiling back there. You see, these people know, in other words, they know what they're doing. It's my contention, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's my contention that the KM attempted to bring in Hollywood into the presidency using Ronald Reagan. Now, I don't know how deep Ronald Reagan was into this. I think a lot of his presidency, he was just being controlled and used because nobody tells these people what to do. I mean, JFK tried to tell him, and they killed him. So whatever was happening with Ronald Reagan, I think that they were using him as a figurehead. They were trying to bring in someone that was controllable, that all the public already liked, a handsome guy, and a well-spoken man. He knows how to handle himself in public, and he's very good and adept at having public dialogue, and he can even play different parts. He's an actor. He's good at playing parts. And these kind of human characteristics would be very helpful to a group who's trying to deceive a public, who want a figure at the top who's controllable, that's likable, and can play the part. And by sticking Hollywood figures in there, they would be able to even more easily and more fluidly control the public. There you can see Richard Nixon. He was neck deep in the whole thing. This is 1955. And then I also threw in a couple extra pictures here. This is 1904. Look at this early picture. They don't even have the owl out yet. Okay? And then here, 20 years later, this is 1924. It says at the bottom right there. I don't know if you can read it. Okay, they're getting more organized. Then look here. Looks to be in like the 50s, about 20, 30 years later. Look how many compared to this one above. The tables are chock full. More tables. I couldn't get a date on this. Maybe somebody knows. But this is the first owl they had. Look at it. And then they brought in this other one. This looks like a paper mache or, poured concrete or something. But they replaced it with this. And I just do that to show you it's developing. Look how they added a whole stage, and there's a sacrificial altar right there at the bottom of the altar. In fact, if you look at the picture that I originated this talk with, there on the bottom right, you can see the fire. And they're doing a sacrifice. That's a sacrifice. A mock sacrifice. Okay, this is owl worship. This is how they hide from you. This is a high society. That's my point in doing this. This is a high, organized society. They're wealthy, nobility. They're bringing in the U.S. president. Okay, these are not your everyday Joe people. These are the folks that are steering and controlling the world. And look at them. They're out there doing mock sacrifices in front of an owl. Folks, that's not coincidence. That's not silly games. This is what you need to understand. These people are not playing a game. They are dead serious. It's so outlandish that it would seem that this is just a joke. Nobody would ever believe this. That's exactly why they do it. You would never believe it. Okay. In order to fool the Confederacy of Nations led by Russia that were watching Khazaria, the Khazarian king melded these Luciferian black magic practices with Judaism and created a secret satanic hybrid religion known as Babylonian Talmudism. This was made the national religion of Khazaria and nurtured the same evil that Khazaria was known for before. You see, this king is a deceiver, but in his nature. In his nature. And he developed this religion called Babylonian Talmudism. And what is it? I looked it up. It is a highly racist Zionism. And then to summarize in some statements, it's a superior race theory. Right? They utilize rites of passage. They have exclusive access to God. But see, I capitalize God to say that they're claiming that is who they are worshiping, but they're actually worshiping Satan. So that G would be small. But what they're claiming is that this is God. That's their claiming. So they have exclusive access to this God because of their blood sacrifices, because of their giving themselves to this God completely and doing evil against the hated Goy, which is us. That's what the Talmud people, the Babylonian Talmudism folk, we are the Goy, meat. We are the meat and cattle. We are their asset to use and destroy and slaughter as they wish. Okay, that's this religion. That's this Talmudism, this Babylonian Talmudism, blood sacrifice oriented, meaning that they actually carry that out. Calendar dates obsessed. They're obsessed with their yearly rituals. If you look at the satanic calendar, there are literally festivals, holidays, all kinds of celebrations every single month, or critical celebrations to it. These are people who are oriented to the cosmic time frame, and we're going to get into that when we get to the Saturnalia and Saturn worship. But they are highly oriented to the cosmic time frames, and so they are obsessed with calendar dates and with annual traditions. They're highly tribal. Again, that comes out of the Canaanite stuff. Absolute in opinion and secure in belief system, so that their opinion is absolute and final. And secure in belief system, meaning everything they know is centered around their belief system. And they don't care if you believe it or not. This is the system of belief that they subscribe to, you see. Their god is Lucifer, a being composed of pure evil. Okay, we're going to get more and more into this as we keep going, because that's going to tie right into Saturn worship. Sadly, the Khazarians continued their evil ways, robbing and murdering those from surrounding countries who traveled through Khazaria. Khazarian robbers often attempted to assume their identities after they murdered these visitors and became masters of disguises and false identities, a practice they have continued even to this very day, along with their child sacrifice occult ceremonies, which are actually ancient Baal worship. And we know that. We've been talking about that. No need to walk into that. We got a lot still to cover. Okay, so in our timeline here, somewhere between around 965, right around in there, to 1200, Russia moves in and obliterates Khazarian. You're going to see what happened. Here we go. The Russians lead a group of nations surrounding Khazarian and invaded in order to stop the Khazarian crimes against their people, which include kidnapping their young children and infants for their blood sacrifice ceremonies to Baal. The Khazarian king and his inner court of criminals and murderers come to be known as the Khazarian Mafia by neighboring countries. The Khazarian leaders had a well-developed spy network through which they obtained prior warning of the invasion and escaped from Khazaria to European nations in the west, taking their vast fortune with them in gold and silver. The Khazarian leaders had a well-developed spy network through which they obtained prior warning of the invasion. What's critical to know about that? This shows you that they had already infiltrated in that 800 or so years. They had already infiltrated Russia. They had already infiltrated down south into Mesopotamia. They had already infiltrated into the surrounding countries with spies and informants. This is a pernicious group, folks. They are not idiots. They have a pulse of what is going on, and that is exactly why this Khazarian king knew that the Russians were about to invade. And he hauled all his gold, all his court, all his magicians, all these people that surround him, hauled off and went to Bohemia. And we're gonna see that here in my little chart. Now we've got the artwork from Dylan Monroe, and we see here I got a little red line. The Khazarians went to Bavaria, and if we look at this map here, you can see the first initial go that the Khazarian king did was to leave Khazaria, and he escaped to Bohemia, which is ancient Austria. That's Austria. And if we look at our timeline here, 1280. So this is right in the middle of the Dark Ages. And if you look at it, it's around 1280. Well, from 1280 to 1450 AD is when they were hiding in Bohemia and organizing and honing their skills and talents with the help of Satan to figure a way to infiltrate all the West. The Khazarian king and his court mafia plotted eternal revenge against the Russians and the surrounding nations that invaded Khazaria and drove them from power. They laid low and regrouped while assuming new identities. In secret, they continued their satanic child blood and sacrifice rituals and trusted Baal to give them the whole world and all its riches, as they claimed he had promised them as long as they kept bleeding out and sacrificing children and infants to him obviously being Satan, the black sun, Lucifer. We can see this little map I made here. They move into Germany, conquer that, take over that royalty there, on into France, and then down into Spain. They took over all these royal families. To accomplish their evasion, they hired Oliver Cromwell to murder King Charles I and make England safe for banking again. This began the English Civil Wars, which raged for nearly a decade, resulting in regicide of the royal family, that's killing off of the bloodline, and hundreds of the genuine English nobility. This is how the city of London was set up as the banking capital of Europe and launched the beginning of the British Empire. And then I write, this is why the Queen of England, King Charles, and the entire Royal English court is not blood authentic nobility. It's because the royalty in these nation states was infiltrated by the KM, literally. They took their leadership and they bred with the royalty, and they killed off the men, and then replaced those men with their people and their kids. Do you see? They completely took over. This is Oliver Cromwell on the left, 1599 to 1658, and King Charles I on the right, 1600 to 1649. They were contemporaries, obviously. And yes, indeed, Cromwell imprisoned Charles in 1646 for treason. It was because I read into it, won't get into it, but basically King Charles wouldn't abide by the demands of Cromwell, and so they killed him. Charles would not repent nor seek resolution for peace, so Cromwell had his head lopped off in 1649, the end. And they even had it in a newspaper. Look they show the blood squirting out of his head as everybody's standing around watching it. And King Charles was no more. The KM decides to infiltrate and hijack all world banking using Babylonian black magic, also known as Babylonian money magic, or the secret art of making money from nothing, using the power of pernicious usury, which is illegal taxes, to accumulate interest. The KM used their vast fortune to enter into a new system of banking based on secret Babylonian black magic money magic that they claim to have learned from the evil spirits of Baal in return for their many child sacrifices to him. The reason why magic has a K on it, that's from Anton LaVey. That is to basically show high magic, magic that is above just the normal everyday black magic that people are practicing. This is the magic that the Luciferian practices. This is the magic that the elite and royalty practice, and so it's denoted with a K to signify it. This Babylonian money magic involved the substitution of paper credit certificates for gold and silver deposits, which allowed travelers to travel with their money in a form that offered easy replacement should they lose the certificates or have them stolen. Interesting how the very problem that was started by the Khazarians, who also had a solution provided by them. That's a Hegelian dialectic. Okay, what they were doing when they killed off, when they were killing off King Charles, they're taking over the banking system. This is 1649. Okay, and they're going to use pernicious usury, just like they're still doing to this day, to begin to tax the citizens, to begin to steal money from people. Okay, they did this through what's called a Hegelian dialectic. Okay, and this is basically, it's a straw man. And what you have is a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis, and these support an agenda and carry out that agenda, okay? So what Khazaria wanted was a way of taxing people that would force them to give them money. Even though they weren't going to do anything good with that money, they still wanted to be able to tax these people. So what they use is a dialogue, is a conniving, deceitful dialogue to trick people into doing what you want, into them doing what you want. And so in this case here, we have a problem, a thesis, create a victim with a post problem. So the way they're going to tax people is they're going to create a problem. They're going to create a victim. In other words, if you don't pay us taxes, we won't be able to bring in military forces to protect you. And you will be exposed. And if you are exposed, they could come and take you, rape you, and there will be nothing, no one would be able to save you. Okay, so you put fear into people like that. And so you get people to do what you want by filling them with fear. Okay, and so then the same group that creates the problem, they also create the solution. And so they say, the solution is, for you're not dying in war, is give us money. You give us money, we'll be able to get all the munitions, and we'll be able to hire all the people and the soldiers to go out and protect you. So all you have to do to resolve your fear of being killed in war is give us money. WMDs. Do you remember when they talked about WMDs? And they said, hey, if we don't go in and destroy Saddam Hussein, he's going to use weapons of mass destruction in New York, in Chicago, in San Francisco, and he's going to use these biological chemical weapons, and he's going to destroy us. And so we've got to go in there and completely obliterate this entire society of people because these people want to kill you. It's the same narrative. And so then what happens? Everybody pays off the taxes. They sign off their rights with the Patriot Act, and people willingly, that's the magic, they willingly turn over their rights. They willingly pay money. They willingly vote for these warmongers. You see, and it's all through fear. Another one was COVID. If you don't get this elixir that we have made injected into your body, you saw it. You saw what they're doing. You're going to die. They called it a long, dark winter. You're going to be sick. All you people that don't get this, you're all going to die. You're going to be ill health. You're going to be spreading your germs to everybody else, and you're going to be a nuisance to society. You should be banned from society. You're a terrible person. You see, and that's how you coerce people with fear to go out and have a injection that hasn't even been tested. They'll just willingly do it. See, that's the black magic. You get people to willingly turn themselves over. There were actually people that were celebrating. They're celebrating turning themselves over to a science that was completely, well, they said it was untested, but they knew exactly what it was going to do. Same thing with vaccines long before COVID. Remember the food pyramid? That was another one. Remember how they told you your baseline food that everybody needs to be eating tons and tons of is grain. Tons and tons of grain. And what happened? That built a gluten-intolerant society. Blew out the enzymatic structure with the poisons that they were putting on all the wheat, the glyphosate and whatever other chemicals that they use. And then that goes in and destroys the enzymatic system, the probiotics and all that in people's gut. And then they develop these other problems with their gut that they have no idea is coming from the food that they're eating. And they just think, oh, tough luck, I'm gluten intolerant. This is not by accident. That's what you need to understand. They're doing this maliciously, intentionally. You are being intentionally deceived. This isn't a mistake or coincidence. This is intentional. That's what you have to understand about this group. I think one of the biggest ones is the man-made climate change. They've got everyone convinced that just breathing, you are destroying the planet. You are just being alive. You are a threat to the planet. It's the same as the sin con from the church. Just being born, you are sin. Just coming out of sin, you are now sinful, and you are a bane to society unless you believe in this religion. And it's the same thing. This climate change, you are a bane to society unless you pay us taxes, unless you pay us money. You shouldn't even be alive. This puts fear into people. This puts self-hate into people. This undermines people's development. Do you see how psychologically that harms a person when they think just my being alive, just from being born and just breathing, I'm terrible. And this is how a person is sidetracked. And they don't realize that they have been caught up in a Hegelian dialectic, a straw man. And they've bought the straw man, be it climate change, sin, COVID, WMDs, it doesn't matter. They've bought it. And once you've bought it, you then will shape your life around it. And this is how this Khazarian mafia operates. This is black magic. Black magic is an abracadabra. Black magic is controlling millions of people with a simple disease. That's black magic. Black magic is getting hundreds of millions of people to gladly give you their money and encourage you to go to war and sign away their rights. That's black magic. People have been conned with the idea that it's this hocus pocus. It's not. It's mind control. It's psychology. It's the psychology of fear, which destroys and corrodes your mind. This is why I started this lecture with, it's so important to conquer your fears. And you don't conquer your fears by praying them away. You don't conquer your fears by wishing them away. You don't conquer your fears by asking someone to save you. You conquer your fears through knowledge. You conquer your fears by learning, oh, That's why they promoted WMDs. That's why they promoted vaccines. That's why they promoted the food pyramid. That's why they promoted man-made climate change. That's why they made me a sinner. Now you know why. You will conquer your fear of those things by knowing why and how they came about. And then all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. That changes perspective completely. You see, this is how you free yourself. This is literally how you free yourself. Eventually, the Khazarian king and his small surrounding court infiltrated Germany with a group that chose the name the Bauers of Germany. Bauer means farmer in German, to represent them and carry on their ball-powered system of evil. The Bauers of the Red Shield, which represented their secret blood-based child sacrifices, changed their name to Rothschild, also known as Child of the Rock or Satan. The Bauer surname genetically traces back to Austria and Bavaria. Remember how I mentioned earlier the Khazarians went into Bohemia, Bavaria, Austria? There you go. We have their name traced right back to Bavaria, Bohemia. And that ties directly to Khazaria, which ties directly, follow, to the Amalekites, which ties directly to Noah, Esau, all that stuff. You see? Are you following it now? You following it now? Okay, so time to do a deep dive. I found this at the top right there. You see that address? That's where I found this. The occult history of the Rothschild family crest. The family crest has a red shield and a hexagram. Did you know that the Star of David is a hexagram? It's a 6-pointed star. We're going to get into that. I've underlined the critical elements. The Rothschild family crest, this red shield. The hexagram is also known as the Seal of Solomon, the Magen David, or the Star of David. It was a symbol of Moloch and Ashtoreth. Saturn, which has been known to represent Satan, was also represented by the hexagram. You're going to say to yourself, now, why would Satan be associated with the hexagram? I'm going to tell you why. Interesting to note, there under Rothschild family crest occultism, Rome was first called Saturnia, the city of Saturn. And if we look at our little map here, look there, right next to the Roman Empire, you see cult of Saturn. Okay, the synagogue of Satan. Who is that? That's the Babylonian Talmudists that are underneath Judea, the Ashkenazi Jews. That's why that says synagogue of Satan. It's because these are Babylonian magicians who are practicing Satanism underneath the guise of being Jews, Ashkenazi Jews. And then across from that, we have the cult of Saturn, the Roman Empire. This comes out of Amun-Ra and the pharaohs. We just don't have time to get into it. Saturn is the black sun. This is the critical thing you need to know. Saturn is the black sun, and the symbolism of the black sun ties directly into the hexagram and the rings of Saturn and the worship of the black sun. Now, this all ties back to a god named Kronos, whose mother was Gaia and father was Uranus, the sky. Kronos castrated his father and killed him to take his throne. So he became the god of the cosmos, time and death. Now, you see in these photos of Kronos, before we get into this other stuff, notice how he's with a sickle. See, he's a sickle. He's the bringer of death. Harvest time. He's the god of the cosmos, okay? Because he killed his father Uranus, the god of the sky, and so he took over the cosmos. This is all Greek mythology, and it's important that you know this because it ties directly into Saturnalia. Do you notice something about this god? Do you notice he always has a small child with him? We take a look at the next set of pictures. This is also Kronos. He ate his sons because he was afraid that they would kill him like he killed his own father. And so he killed and ate his kids so they could never take his throne. He's a cannibalist. You're going to see some incredible ties here. Kronos' birthday was the winter solstice because the sun is born every year. Now we're starting to get into the tough stuff. So Kronos' birthday was Christmas. Why was it Christmas or the winter solstice? Why was it the winter solstice? Because this is when the sun is rebirthed. This is when the sun is born. The sun is born on the winter solstice. Does that sound anything like a religion that you know of? That the sun is born on the winter solstice at Christmas time, at the celebration of the rising of the sun. Do you see the trickery that's happening here? Do you see the mind or the wordplay that's happening here that plays with your mind? That's all intentional. Cronus, also known as Saturn, is also known as Saturn. Now, why is Cronus also known as Saturn? Rings. The rings of time. Okay? What does time do? Time devours all things. This reminds me of the riddle that Gollum presented to Bilbo when he was down in the tunnels and depths with Gollum. And Gollum said, "This thing devours all things. Birds, beasts, flowers, trees, gnaws iron, bites steel, turns hard stone to meal, slays the king, ruins the town, and beats the high mountain down." And the answer is time. Time devours all things. This God represents the devouring of life. Who devours all of life? Lucifer, the black sun. And so Saturn was known as the black sun, which is time, which devours all things. Saturn Cronus was given a day of worship called Saturn's Day or Saturday. Folks, to this day, we still have a Saturday. Guess what happened on Saturday in ancient times? That was Saturn's Day. That's when everybody worshipped Kronos. Who's Kronos? Kronos is Lucifer, the black sun. Why does a hexagram represent Saturn? Well, maybe because there's a hexagon on top of Saturn. Did you know that? And how do you think these ancient people knew that there was a hexagram on top of Saturn? Did you know that the star here, this hexagram, there are 6 points, 6 triangles, and 6 sides? That's 666. That's the number of the beast. That's Satan. Did you realize this? That's what this symbology means. That's who they're worshiping. This ties you in, okay? Saturn was known and worshipped as the black sun, the god of the cosmos, the god of time, the god of death. Time devours all things. Lucifer eats all life. Lucifer, god of the earth.
What we think we understand, where we came from, what we think we're doing, the more you begin to see we've been lied to. We've been lied to by every institution. What makes you think for 1 minute that the religious institution is the only one that's never been touched? You can bet your bottom dollar that the religious institutions of this world are at the bottom of the dirt. The religious institutions in this world are put there by the same people who gave you your government, your corrupt education, the Knights Templars who set up your international banking cartels in the 12th, 13th, and 14th century are the same people that gave you educational institutions, colleges. Where do we get the word college? College comes from the collegia, the Latin Roman college of cardinals. I could go on for hours just give you examples. I mean, when you graduate, you come out with a square mortarboard, a black square mortarboard. What's all that about? Black square mortarboards. It has to do with the planet Saturn. Saturn, we're told that in the Old Testament that the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, were worshippers of one God. That's never been true, not true now, and never will be true. That's just one more story that's been given to us. That's never been true. The Hebrew people were worshippers of many gods, many different divine beings. They were the most eclectic theology on the face of the earth. Next to modern day Christianity is Judaism. Eclectic meaning it has collected from all over the world concepts and ideas and put it together and called it today Judaism. Judaism today is the most eclectic religion on the face of the earth. Virtually nothing of what it teaches is true. Virtually nothing of its supposedly background is true. And consequently, the world is filled with violence, bloodshed, or disorder. Good people are dying. There are children who are starving. Our world is in trouble. And people are calling out to God for protection. People are calling out to God to help our nation and never realizing for one moment that the divine presence in the universe not listening. Why? Because you have your own concepts of whatever you think is true, whatever you believe to be true, but you have never confronted the real truth. The real truth is that the people who are in power, who put this system together, have been in power for thousands of years. This has been going on from day one. All of the things which are going on in this world today, from 9/11, all of the wars in the Middle East, all of the incredible bloodshed that's being spilled all over the earth, can be traced back to, and you might want to remember what I'm saying here, because I'm sure you're not going to make the connection when I first tell you, but I'm going to try to explain it to you. The things which are happening today, the people who are in power in this country, the great generals from around the world who are planning wars and violence and bloodshed, all of this stuff can be traced back to the planet Saturn. Saturn is a very, very pivotal, important concept in theology and religion. And most people have never been told any of this and have no knowledge of it at all. But the planet Saturn is very important in world affairs, in theology. In the Islamic belief, the holy city of Mecca, which is in Saudi Arabia, Mecca has a Masonic circle, and within the Masonic circle is a square, because you got to do everything on the square, remember. You have a town square, you have New York Square, you have a Vatican Square, you have Red Square, you have all kinds of squares. Why? Because this is Masonic. And it goes all the way back into the ancient world, the terms and symbols. Again, the planet is called the Black Square. It's called the Dark Sun, the Black Sun. This is what the Nazis and the SS and the Gestapo wore black. That's why priests wear black. That's why judges wear black robes. Why do you think a judge wears a black robe? He wears a black robe because when you used to graduate from university, you wear a black robe. Why black robes? Darth Vader wears a black robe. What the hell does a black robe have to do with anything? The judges wear black robes. You know, Supreme Court judges wear black robes. Black robes represent the priesthood of the planet Saturn, the Saturnalian Brotherhood. All you need to do is study Nazism, and you will begin to see that the powers behind the Nazi Party, the Thule Society, the Germanian Order, were all members of something called the Saturnalian Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of Saturn. Saturn was the god of darkness, chaos, and destruction. He teaches you a lesson. He will take your life if you don't listen to him. So consequently, Saturn was very, very important in the ancient world. Thank you. Saturn's name, incidentally, in the old Phoenician ancient Canaanite religion, in the Middle East, the old Phoenician Canaanite worship of the planet Saturn was the most important god of all the ancient world, was the planet Saturn, and his symbol, long before the Hebrews were ever in Cana, the symbol in Cana for the planet Saturn was a six-pointed star. Today we call that star the Star of David. There was no Star of David. It's the Star of Saturn. All of the Jewish reference books, all the Encyclopedia Judaica, you go to the synagogue, go up into Mulholland Drive, up to the Jewish University and spend 3 weeks there and look up Saturn. You'll find out that 98% of all Judaism is a worship of the planet Saturn. Better wake up and understand where this stuff comes from. Because if there is a God in heaven, if there is a divine presence in the universe that demands righteousness and justice, then you're going to have to rethink what we believe and where we're going and what the world is all about, because for the last 2,000 years we haven't done too well. Saturn was referred to as El, E-L. El was the god Saturn in the old Phoenician Canaanite system. And consequently, anyone that promoted the worship of El is where we get the word elder. You become an elder because you were worshiping El. And when you worship El and become an elder, then how did you get to be an elder? You got elected. So therefore we have elections. Now that you have been elected to be an elder, now you are one of the elites. Why? Because now you have moved up like in an elevator. You are now moved. Consequently, it's all money. It's all manipulation and exploitation coming out of Phoenicia, Cana. It goes back to the old Sumerian, Babylonian systems of words and terms and symbols and emblems that have been used to manipulate the whole human race. Because our masters don't give a damn about you or your family or your destiny with God. All they care about is what they have always cared about, and that's controlling the whole damn world.
So there's the black sun on the left. There's the hexagram. There's the hexagon on top of Saturn. And then we have Cronus. What I'm emphasizing here, what I'm trying to show you is these are all the same thing. They all represent Lucifer. They are all symbols for and of Lucifer. That's why they use them. That's why they use this symbology in their worship. It's because these symbols represent a deeper underlying knowledge. Now look where I found the black sun. I did a search for the black sun, which means Lucifer and Satan. Look where I found it here in the Hall of SS Generals in, I think that's Wewelsburg Castle, Germany. Look, it's right there on the floor. It's in the Azov Battalion patch, their rank. And look, they're holding a flag. There's the black sun, the symbol of Nazism there in the middle. The communism is Satanism. Get it? These are not groups, organizations of people that have your best interest in mind, that have the human interest in mind. They are not interested in your betterment. They're interested in controlling you. They're interested in controlling the power, the planet, having all the power. That's why these are militant groups. They're not there to have a dialogue with you. They're there for you to do as you're told, and if you don't do as you're told, you're either killed or imprisoned. Period. You see, these are anti-human groups. This is an anti-human religion. That's why it centers on cannibalism. It is anti-human. This mafia, this is their religion. The Khazarian mafia's religion is Saturnalia, is ancient Saturn worship, worship of the black sun. This is where it gets even heavier. Saturn equals Satan equals the black cube. Satan and the black cube of Saturn. One of the most mysterious symbols in our culture today is the black cube of Saturn. Saturn is not only the hexagram, it is also the cube. Here's why. The black cube is a representation of the planet's north pole, meaning Saturn's north pole, which forms a perfect hexagon with the diameter of each of its 6 sides being very close to the projected diameter of the Earth. The cube is a 3-dimensional representation of the 2-dimensional hexagonal north pole of Saturn. That's why they're related. Look here, from Fritz Springmeier. This is the gentleman that wrote that book, The Illuminati, The Blood of the Illuminati, or that book that talked about the Illuminati. This is the same guy, former FBI, CIA. Saturn is an important key to understanding the long heritage this conspiracy has back to antiquity. The city of Rome was originally known as Saturnia, or City of Saturn. The Roman Catholic Church retains much of the Saturn worship in its ritual. Who gave us the Bible? The Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church retains much of the Saturn worship in its ritual. Human sacrifice? Is there a human sacrifice at the center of Western religion? Saturn also relates to Lucifer. In various occult dictionaries, Saturn is associated with evil. Look where else there are black cubes. Australia, Denmark, Manhattan, Santa Ana. Oh, and look, guess what also is a black cube? The Kaaba. That's in Mecca. And look at the rings that form around the Kaaba. These folks don't even realize what they're worshiping. That cube literally represents Satan. The cube, when flattened out, becomes a Christian cross. In Judaism, the six-pointed Star of David represents Satan and originates from Saturn. Orthodox Jews wear the black cube of Saturn on their forehead, like the third eye, and call it tefillin. I don't know how to pronounce that. Look how the cube, when you unfold it, it forms a perfect cross. And then we see here, look what's on this dude's head. The black cube. And what does this tell you? Satan is Saturn, is represented in the hexagram, is in the black sun, is the black cube, is the cross. The black cube in Mecca in the occult is called the hypercube. It represents mind control. That's why the TV is black and cube shaped. The graduation hat is a black cube, etc. It's all mind control. When Muslims walk around the Kaaba in rings, it is a representation of Saturn's rings. Saturn equals Satanism. That is what you're giving your energy to. Same with Christianity. The cross, when folded up, folds into a cube. More mind control. Same with all the other religions, all based in Satanism and created by the dark occult. I'll never forget when I heard, Mark Passio. When I heard Mark Passio claim, I'll never forget this, when he claimed that all of Western religion was invented by the Order of the Black Snake. And I remember hearing him say that and thinking, there's no way. There's no way that's true. And what you begin to find out when you begin to study this stuff and you begin to hear guys like, who is it, Jordan Maxwell, and you begin to hear the information they have to tell you. Speaking of which, I'll just go to the next slide. You begin to understand that you've been deceived. You've been deceived because this group claimed God, and they claimed they had exclusive access to God, and you had to follow their symbols and rituals to know this God. That's mind control. And it was one of the most difficult characteristics of my life I've ever had to accept, and that is that I have been captured. I've been captured with mind control. And I've been captured with these symbols. I've been captured with these meanings and these traditions and these edicts that, you know, when you're born, you're this way, and you have to do these things to find resolution, and you're apart from God, and you're separated, and all this kind of stuff. Was coming to realize that all of these things were just simply means to control me and keep me from thinking for myself and keep me from being a free man. And that's exactly what the Khazarian Mafia wants. And it's the reason why I show you this stuff, is so that not only it conquers your fear, but it educates you and also tells you this is why it's the way that it is. This is why there's a six-pointed star. It has nothing to do with David. It has everything to do with Satanism. It's a sign of the 666. And people just don't know this. They've been brainwashed with other ideas to cover over what's actually happening. And again, this goes back to that same theme that I talked about at the beginning of the essay. This group hides in abject secrecy. They do not want to be known. And so they bury themselves in symbolism and then tell you false meanings of those symbols. Give you false ideas about yourself in your head. So you'll not only never know anything about yourself or the world, but you'll never catch them. And when I come to you on a day like today and I show this kind of stuff to you, it's so outlandish to many of you that you're like, there's no way. There's no way. This guy's nuts. And that is black magic defined. Continuing on, from the cult of Saturn, notice on our little handy dandy map here from our friend Dylan Monroe, look how we have the Knights Templar there, right below Rome, and Baphomet. Did you know that the Knights Templar secretly worshipped Baphomet? Who's Baphomet, Chuck? This is Baphomet. There is all kinds of symbolism in this figure. First of all, it's a goat. That's an ancient, the goat is an ancient Egyptian god, Mendes, who actually is a representation of what? A black snake. And speaking of snakes, look at the snakes on its belly, the Baphomet's belly. Look at the scales on the belly and around the snakes. Look at the scales below the wings, or along the wing edges. Okay, this is signifying the black snake. And then we notice that the snakes are crossing 3 times, once at their tail, once in the middle, and then once at the head. And the heads are what? They're looking at that circle at the top, which is the earth. interestingly, look at this here. Here you see the Pope. Isn't it interesting? He has those same snakes. And they cross 3 times, and the snakes represent, obviously, Leviathan. And they are watching over that circle, which is the earth. And then look what's at the top of the scepter of the Pope, which is a cross. What does that say? The church rules the world. The church sits over the world as Lucifer watches it. That's what that scepter is saying to you. This represents the crossing of the 3 snakes, represents the lower 3 chakra. These are lower 3 chakra people. In other words, they have no heart. They have no compassion. They have no empathy. They are not concerned with the upper levels of the chakra, the spiritual experience. They are concerned with the mortal experience. That's why blood, the carrier of life, the giver of life, is their obsession. They are obsessed with the earth. They are obsessed with earth calendars, earth characteristics, the cosmos. This is why all of Christianity comes out of astrotheology, a cosmic idea of the universe. And these people see themselves as the ruler of the cosmos. That's because Satan is the ruler of the earth, the ruler of the material world, the ruler of the bottom 3 chakra. The bottom 3 chakra is, the first chakra is just the gripping to life. It's a grim avidity, which is the holding to life for the sake of life itself, for no other reason but to be alive. That's the bottom chakra. And then the next one up is the sexual chakra. This is the projection of, or excuse me, this is the procreation. This is continuing your life and bloodline through the blood, through the exchange of the fluids of the body. This is all material. This is all matter. And then finally, projection, the power projection, which is the solar plexus, is the final place at the top. This is the projecting of your will, the projecting of your power onto the planet, onto others. This is the chakras that the lion lives by. The gripping to life, the spreading of his genetic, and then the killing and taking of life, power projection. And that's the lion's concern. The lion's concern is not home life. The lion's concern is not the betterment of other groups and other lions. The lion is concerned about himself. He's self-consumed. And so there's no empathy that's going to come out of that lion. There's not going to be any compassion that comes out of that lion. That lion is a predator. That is why these people use that symbology, is they see themselves as predator. They see Satan as a predator, a roaring lion that's devouring. This is what that represents. And of course, it's sitting on the earth. That's a globe that it's sitting upon. And then notice that it's androgyne. It's both male and female, and it is a beast. It is both hooves as well as a human torso. So this idea of androgyne, this idea of smearing the sexes and smearing the gender, these people love that idea. These people, that's why they prey on the kids. And there's this whole gender movement that's happening. It's because the Khazarian Mafia is trying to capitalize on this androgyne obsession that they associate with Lucifer. It has nothing to do with the betterment of people's psychology. It has nothing to do with affirming people's drives and will. It has nothing at all to do with that. It is all entirely controlled. This is why those in Hollywood that sell their soul to Satan, when they have children, they're given the choice. They either raise their children as the opposite sex to which they were born, or they sacrifice one of them. So that's the choice. If you want to stay in the group and not die yourself, all your kids, you either raise them all the opposite sex to what they're born as, or you're going to sacrifice one of them. And that's the deal. These people, they're not, in other words, they're not doing this to affirm the psychology of the child. They're predators. They're preying on the family. They're preying on these groups that they control. And so we see that in this Baphomet, in this representation of the evil that they worship. The head itself, you can see, forms a star. The goatee forms the bottom of the pentagram. Then the 2 ears form the sides, and the 2 horns form the top. And then that torch there is the light of wisdom. That's essentially the black sun. And it is through the balancing of dualism that one controls the mortal world. And so the 2 horns there at the top represent good and evil. Just like the hands, the 2 fingers, as above, so below, this is pointing towards dualism. The dualistic characteristic that is the mortal life. They are celebrating God. They are celebrating the mortal life. They are not concerned with transcendence. They are not concerned with orienting to the heart and orienting to the spiritual sense of loving one another. They have absolutely no desire or concern for that. Their concern is usurpation, taking. I take the innocence of those that I sacrifice. I take the innocence of those that I mind control, and I control them. This is what fulfills them. This is what you need to understand. When you don't have a heart, you get fulfillment through control. When you don't center on compassion, you get fulfillment through the taking of life. This is what fulfills you. What gives you energy and emotion and passion is the taking of a free individual's life. This figure is a celebration of that evil. And by knowing this, not only are you not afraid of it, but you understand why it looks like that. That's why it looks like that. If you look here on the left, it says solve and coagula. Distillation. It is through distillation that one understands the world. And through how do I resolve a problem? Let's say I'm trying to separate the alcohol from the water. These are alchemical metaphors I'm talking about here. So if I'm trying to separate the alcohol from the water, the spirit from the matter, I would solve or dissolve it by boiling it. And then I boil out the alcohol, and then I coagulate it. I recondense it back into liquid and collect the extract. And what I've done in that process is I have purified this. And that is what this solvent coagula is claiming. And they're claiming by aligning to these lower three chakras, you purify your life to that of the animal who does not have any consciousness, who does not have anything but instinct. And you are acting on the usurping and the devouring consumption that rules the animal. And this is distillating. This image here is attempting to distillate out of the individual their compassion, so that all that's left is their animal instinct, so that they're a killer. Well, these are alchemical principles that this group is borrowing, is taking, is using for themselves as a representation for this evil. So through the human sacrifice, I purify. Through sacrificing the child, through sacrificing the human being, I purify my mortal self, my mortal being. My spiritual sense is distillated through the sacrifice. See, this stuff relates to you because you can understand this stuff, because most of the West has understood themselves through the distillation of sin. Distilling this out of one's life through the giving of oneself to this religious system, this belief system. One distillates their idea of themselves through the system, and then they are purified after and through the sacrifice. That's where this idea comes from, folks. It comes straight out of Satanism. It comes straight out of the idea that someone else must die in order for you to be purified. That is a satanic principle, and that has been integrated directly into Christianity, into all the Western religions. You see? This is, what you're finding out now is how deeply you have been lied to about the world, the cosmos, yourself, God, who runs the world, who owns the world and rules the world. You've been totally, completely deceived. And studying this group will teach you that, because that's their MO. Their method of operation is deceit. The Rothschilds, as the frontmen for the KM, infiltrate and hijack British banking and then hijack the whole nation of England. Bauer Rothschild had 5 sons who infiltrated and took over European banking and the City of London's central banking system through various crafty covert operations, including a false report of Napoleon winning against the British when he actually lost. This allowed the Rothschilds to use fraud and deception to steal the wealth of English nobility and the landed gentry, people of high societal means, nobility, and privilege, who had made business investments with the City of London banking institutions.
Today I'm going to show you the family tree of the Rothschild family, one of the wealthiest families in world history, as well as one of the most controversial. First of all, the name Rothschild comes from the German for red shield. It's a reference to the fact that the family originally used a red shield as an identifying mark on their house. Their story begins in Germany with this individual here, Meyer Amschel Rothschild, who was initially a dealer in rare coins and an apprentice banker. However, things really took off for him because of a special relationship he had with a German prince, William IX of Hesse-Kassel. That prince appointed Meyer to be his court Jew. A court Jew was actually an official position in those days. Because Christians were prohibited from certain types of money lending, nobles would often hire a Jew to fulfill this role. So Meyer ended up managing the money for one of the richest princes in Europe, and by doing so, he himself became very rich as well. Eventually, he started managing money for other princes, and even entire governments. By this point, he had several adult sons. So what he did was he created a Rothschild bank, and he sent each of his 5 sons to a different capital in Europe to run a branch there. His eldest son, Amschel, ran the original branch in Frankfurt, and then his son Solomon was sent to Vienna, Nathan to London, Karl to Naples, and James to Paris. The family then developed a network of agents that allowed for safe and speedy transfer of gold across the continent, as well as for ease of communication between the various branches. This made all 5 branches extremely successful. However, the London branch was perhaps the most successful of all. During the Napoleonic Wars, Nathan almost single-handedly financed the entire British war effort and took care of paying British troops and their allies across the continent. So by the 1820s, the Rothschilds were the wealthiest family in Europe, and they continued to be hugely influential within the world of international finance throughout the 19th century. The 5 brothers were given the title of Baron by the Emperor of Austria, which is why you often see the German von or a French de before their last name. Nathan, being based outside of the continent, was one of the few that did not use the title. So let's look at the 3rd generation Rothschilds. Almost all of the males in the third generation married one of their female first cousins. This ensured that the dynasty's wealth stayed within the family. So, for example, Anselm, the firstborn son of Solomon, married his cousin Charlotte, the daughter of Nathan. He's shown in yellow because he's from the Austrian branch, and she's shown in red because she's a member of the British branch. Likewise, Lionel, the firstborn son of Nathan, married his cousin, also named Charlotte, but she was a daughter of Karl from the Italian branch.
This is Jacob Rothschild on the right and Marina Abramovic on the left. And the reason why I'm showing you this is from a couple of years ago at an event that they attended. And the reason I'm showing you this is for you to see that they really are Satanists. But they come across, look, he's just standing with his hands behind his back. There's nothing to worry about. But look what's behind them. That's some kind of painting. We're going to study that in a minute. This is Marina here. She's also practicing Satanist. Notice this picture on the left here with the child. Notice also, this is a woman who's never had any plastic surgery, so she claims, and she's in her 70s. Does that look like a person who's in their 60s and 70s in these pictures? Did you know that adrenochrome de-ages you? Did you know that? Did you know that it makes the skin tighter and thicker? Keeps your hair color the same color. It will never gray. If you're consistently drinking adrenochrome, you will de-age. You won't age. This is one of the secrets in Hollywood of how all of the men and women don't age and stay looking so young. It's because they have a consistent diet of adrenochrome, children's blood. What is the painting that they are standing in front of? This is a painting called Satan Summoning His Legions. Now, why do you think at a special gala public event, they would want to be pictured right in front of Satan summoning his legions? I think that's coincidence. You notice I noticed something about this painting here on the left. Do you notice something above Satan's head there? Look at the dude on the right, how he's looking up at it. Here's a closer shot. That looks like a mouth to me. And two eyes, see the red? That looks like the mouth of Satan, does it not? Look here. Look how much it looks like the papal hall at the Vatican, which looks like a snake mouth. Here's a bigger picture of it. Do you see the little white light dots going into the mouth? Those look like souls flowing into the mouth of Satan. Here we have the papal hall. You don't believe me? Here it is occupied. That is literally the papal hall at the Vatican in Rome. Does that look like a snake mouth to you? Do those look like scales on the ceiling and on the walls? Here's a viper mouth. Interesting. Here's the outside of the building. Here's a snake. Do those look similar to you? Here's a close-up. Look at how the stained glass forms an eye. Look at the scales on top and how it slopes like a snakehead slopes. Has the brow over the eye. Look how it's tile on the outside, look like scales. These people are mocking you, folks. They're mocking you with their architecture. They're putting who? The entire congregation into the mouth of the snake. The Rothschilds set up a private fiat banking system that specialized in making counterfeit money from nothing, charging pernicious usury, illegal taxes for the British people, using what should have been their own money. This was the black art of Babylonian money magic. They claimed to insiders that such technology and secret money power was provided to them by Lucifer, Baphomet, because of their frequent child bleeding out and ritual sacrifices to him. And we already looked at the Baphomet symbolism. We know that that is Satan. Once they had infiltrated and hijacked the British banking system, they interbred prima nocte with the British royals. We talked about that earlier, remember, where they bred with the local kingdoms there in the 1500s, and they hijacked the royalty systems, the nobility systems that were in place with their own seed, prima nocte. Some experts believe that the Rothschilds genocided the royal family members by staging secretly managed illicit and adulterous breedings with their own Khazarian men in order to replace the royals with their own pretenders to the throne, a practice known as prima nocte, and we all remember the scene in Braveheart when that happened. In the 1600s, the KM murdered the British royals and substitute their own fakes. In the 1700s, they murder the French royals. Right before World War I, they murder Austrian Archduke Ferdinand to start World War I. In 1917, they assembled their KM army, the Bolsheviks, and infiltrate and hijack Russia, murder the Tsar and his family in cold blood. They bayonet his favorite daughter through the chest and steal all the Russian gold, silver, and art treasures. Right before World War II, they murder the Austrian and German royals. They then rid of the Chinese royals and disempower the Japanese ruler. Realize who you are dealing with in reading these words, folks. They are not kidding around. They are not kidding around. This isn't a joke. They aren't faking it. This is real. This is real. And learning this stuff is how you're going to be able to fight it. This is how you save yourself, by learning this stuff. The Khazarian Mafia's intense hatred of anyone who professed faith in any god but their god Baal has motivated them to murder kings and royalty and make sure they can never rule. They have done the same with American presidents, running sophisticated, covert operations to disempower them. Remember what I was saying about Reagan? That's what they did. If that doesn't work, the KM assassinates them like they did to McKinley, Lincoln, and JFK. Remember the Clinton body bags? These are the people that are found having committed suicide by shooting themselves in the head twice and hanging themselves. But they committed suicide. Okay. The KM wished to eliminate any strong rulers or elected officials who dared to resist their Babylonian money magic and their covert power gained from their deployment of their human compromise network. The Rothschilds expand their network to create international narcotics trafficking on behalf of the KM. This is now where we're going to get into the Opium Wars. The Rothschilds covertly ran the British Empire. Read that? They covertly ran the British Empire. In other words, they are running the empire. Just past, look at our map here. Look at the map. There. Just past the Reformed age, right there, 1760. Bank of England, remember we read about that? They're running the show. They are entirely running the show by about 1750. They're running the whole thing. They own all the money, and they have regicided all of English nobility. They are running the show. Period. The Rothschilds covertly ran the British Empire and crafted an evil plan to recover the vast amounts of gold and silver the British had been paying to China for its high-quality silk and spices that were unavailable anywhere else. You see, they're still hustling in the silk and spice stuff. The East India Company was their cover for the beginning of the Opium War. The Rothschilds, through their international spy network, had heard of Turkish opium. There's the spy network. Okay, remember how I said that they had spy networks and that's what saved them from being destroyed by Russia? Here they've got spy networks all over the place, and they have figured out that Turkish opium had habit-forming characteristics. It's opium. Highly addictive pleasure drug. They deployed a covert operation to buy Turkish opium and sell it in China. This was all done through the East India Trade Company, infecting millions with a bad opium habit that brought back gold and silver into the Rothschild coffers, but not to the British people. And this is the beginning of the drug wars. What they were doing, they were harvesting, generating, sourcing opium. They were then using the East India Company to haul that stuff over to China illegally, and then they sold it for gold and silver in China. And they were bankrupting China, so China went to war with them. To give you an idea how easy opium is to manufacture, I did a little chart here. I'll read this first. The opium addictions created by Rothschild opium sales to China harmed China so badly that China went to war on 2 occasions to stop it. These wars were known as the Boxer Rebellions, or the Opium Wars. The money the Rothschilds gained from the sale of opium was so vast that they became even more addicted to the easy money than the opiate addicts were to the opium. Opium is made from poppy seeds, the poppy plant. California's national flower, or state flower, is the poppy. What happens is, in the fall, or late summer, the poppy forms a pod of seeds. Those are on the bottom left. And then you scrape the pod, which causes a latex-like goo to ooze out of the pod, and it dries overnight and oxidizes. That's why it turns brown. It goes from white to brown. That's oxidation. And then here you see the knife they use to scrape off that opium. That's it. That's it. You simply take the scrapings, you dry them, grind them into powder. That's opium. Think of how easy and cheap it would be to grow this. I mean, poppy's an annual. You can grow poppy. It's so easy to grow poppy. And so this was an easy way. My point here is an easy way to make gobs of money, because you can sell that opium for enormous sums, and you're making it from growing basically annual weeds. So they built an empire on this. The Rothschilds did, and it was so powerful that they eventually went to war. If we look at the map here, I've got the Opium Wars listed out. Right there in AD 1830, addict China with Turkish opium via the East India Company, and they drained China of precious metals. Shortly thereafter, 1839, so it's 10 years later, all the way up until 1860, 2 opium wars, and China loses both to Europe and France. They lost them both. They used that money to then begin the Civil War and to take over America. And that is, the Civil War was funded from opium sales coming out of the Queen in England. And this here I have in red here, I've got it noted. In Russia intervened. And I actually have the evidence. I found it for you guys. I found the evidence of Russia intervening. It's a bit ahead of the lecture, but here's the slide. This is how they intervened in the American Revolutionary War on the left from 1775 to 1783, and in the American Civil War in 1861 and 1865, how Russia intervened, saved our bohinies, and at the same time even created even more hatred with the Khazarian Mafia. This is why you have heard the narrative from Hillary from the very beginning. Russia, Russia, Russia. Russia is bad. Hate Russia. Destroy Russia. Russia is evil. That's right here now. That's right here now. Straight out of the Khazarian Mafia. The Rothschilds were the funding source behind the establishment of the American colonies by incorporating the Hudson Bay Company and other trading companies to exploit the New World of the Americas. It was the Rothschilds who ordered the mass extermination and genocide of the indigenous people of North America to allow for exploitation of the vast natural resources of the continent. The first biological weapons were leprosy, smallpox, and plague. Isn't it interesting that they still use disease as a means of control? I've shown some pictures here of the diseases that they spread intentionally to kill off the Native Americans. There was something like, in the span of about 10 years, at the end of the 1800s, 19th century, over 30 million Native Americans were killed mostly through smallpox, leprosy, and plague, spread by the KM. The Rothschilds start the international slave trade, an enterprise that viewed these kidnapped humans as mere animals, a view that the Khazarians would impose on all the people of the world who were not part of their evil circle, which some called the old black nobility, the old religion. What brought back slavery? Sugar. Sugar, the demand for sugar. Sugar's a drug. The same thing that caused the opium wars is the same thing that brought back slavery. Drugs. Drugs. Sugar is a highly addictive drug. And it was the craving and demand of all the Western, all of Europe, all the West. It was their demand for sugar that brought back slavery. Terence McKenna did a great lecture on it. The Rothschilds' next big project was to start the worldwide slave trade, buying slaves from crooked tribal chiefs in Africa who worked with them to kidnap members of competing tribes for sale as slaves. The Rothschild slave traders then took these kidnapped slaves on their ships in cramped cells to America and the Caribbean, where they were sold. Many died at sea due to bad conditions. The Rothschild bankers learned early on that war was a great way to double their money in a short time by lending money to both warring sides. You see how it works? But in order to be guaranteed collections, they had to get taxation laws passed, which could be used to force payment. So you've got to corrupt the people in charge, the politicians and the generals, and that's what you see, the Hidden Hand Club. These groups work in clubs, and one of the clubs that we are familiar with is the Hidden Hand Club. And I found a whole bunch of pictures of people that were in the Civil War and people that had huge influence on society. And look how many, all of them are a part of the Hidden Hand. The Hidden Hand means you're a part of the Mafia. There's also other clubs. The Black Eye Club, you've seen that before. There's argument as to what causes that, and I'm not going to dive into that. I'm just going to show you that they're all a part of the Black Eye Club. There's the Red Shoe Club. The Red Shoe, what this is, and most people don't know this, or a lot of people don't know, when these gentlemen here that you see in the picture performed the sacrifice that was necessary for them to be a part of the group, you must sacrifice a child to be in these clubs. That child's skin is then made into leather, and then that is made into the shoes that they wear. So they wear the skin of the child that they raped, tortured, and murdered to become a part of the club. And that is what you see in this picture. These gentlemen are mocking you. They're mocking us, and they're laughing at us. Look, it's right in front of you. Look here, the Pope. The Pope also is in the Red Shoe Club. He wears red shoes. They also are made from children's skin. You don't have to believe it, that's fine. But that's what the tradition is. That's what the Red Shoe tradition is. And it's to show that we walk on you. That's what they're saying. We walk on you, we control you. So they love to put it right in your face. Just like the papal hall, and it's a snake mouth, they love to put it right in your face, put you in the symbol. They are eating you, and you are in the symbol, and they stand there and laugh at you because you don't know that you're participating in their con by being complicit with them. The Rothschild private fiat counterfeit banksters plot eternal revenge against the American colonists in Russia who assisted them for losing the Revolutionary War. When the Rothschilds lost the American Revolution, they blamed the Russian Tsar and the Russians for assisting the colonists by blockading British ships. They swore eternal revenge on the American colonists, just as they had when the Russians and their allies crushed Khazaria in AD 1000. The Rothschild KM attempts to retake America in 1812 on behalf of the Khazarian Mafia, but fails, once again because of Russian interference. This failure enraged the Rothschild KM, and they once again plot eternal revenge against both the Russians and the American colonists, and plan to infiltrate and hijack both nations, and asset strip, tyrannize, and then mass murder both nations and their populace. Continuing on, we've been at this for a while. The Rothschilds and their English oligarchy that surrounded them plot ways to retake America, and this became their main obsession. Their favorite plan is to set up an American central bank featuring Babylonian money magic, usury, illegal taxation, aka theft, and secret counterfeiting.
Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the First Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like King or Prince or Baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the King. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters.
In 1913, the Rothschild KM was able to establish a beachhead by bribing crooked, treasonous members of Congress to pass the illegal, unconstitutional Federal Reserve Act on Christmas Eve without a required quorum. The act was then signed by crooked, bought-off President Woodrow Wilson, number 28, who was a traitor to America, like the members of Congress who voted for it. And look, I found pictures of Woodrow Wilson. Look at the handshake. Look at the handshake. That's a Masonic handshake. That's not a normal handshake. Look, he's giving the guy that practically his wrist. These are Masonic handshakes. He's a bought man. Wilson was a bought man. The KM put an illegal, unconstitutional tax system in place in order to make sure that Americans would have to pay for their high-level USG spending, approved by a bought-off, crooked Congress and presidential puppets put into place by corrupt KM campaign finance. It's easy for the KM to garner enough money to elect anyone they want, because when you control a bank that is a secret major counterfeiter, you have all the money made for you that you desire. Absolute corruption corrupts. Absolutely. Doesn't it, though? Just look at Rome.
Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is a government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words "In God We Trust."
At about the same time that they created their illegal usury tax system in America, they also bribed members of Congress to approve the Internal Revenue Service, 1862, which is their private collection agency incorporated in Puerto Rico. And I'm going to show you something here with this little chart. Soon afterwards, they set up the Federal Bureau of Investigation to protect their banksters, to serve their cover-up needs and prevent them from ever being prosecuted for their child sacrifice rituals or pedophile networks, and to also serve as a covert intelligence operation on their behalf. So what we have Babylonian money magic. Here we have the collection agency is established, 1862. Got to pay for the war. Got to pay for the war, folks. Got to pay for the war. And if we don't pay for the war, those Brits, they're going to come and get you. They're going to come and get you. Right? Do you see a theme happening? Then they established the Department of Justice. Yes, in 1908, Bonaparte establishes the FBI. Bonaparte was bought off, just like Napoleon was bought off. And this is going to be the enforcement agency that will guard their crimes that they make with the United States Federal Reserve System. So the FBI was not set up to protect you and to bring about justice. It's a criminal justice system. It is justice for the criminals. So the Department of Justice was established to guard the crimes of the KM within the system, within the government. It had nothing to do with guarding you and helping you and protecting you. Nothing. Nothing. In fact, these agencies, note that the FBI, BATF, that's Tobacco and Firearms, IRS, and others have no official charter according to the Library of Congress, and so have no right to exist or issue paychecks. You're under control. You're being used and pushed around. It is not about your betterment. It is not about your having a nicer, more protected, better life. It is about covering over their crimes and continuing with their crimes to hunt you. That's what it's about.
Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the president is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the president is president of the corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen, and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, the obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The Secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square.
The Rothschild KM deployed the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia to extract incredibly savage, bloody revenge on innocent Russians, which they had plotted for many years, ever since Khazaria was destroyed. They pre-staged and engineered the Russian Revolution by using its central banks to pay for the Bolshevik infiltration of Russia and the revolution on behalf of the KM. The Bolsheviks were actually created and deployed by the KM as the essential part of their long-planned revenge on the Russian Tsar and the innocent Russian people for breaking up Khazaria in about 81,000 for its repeated robbery, murder, and identity theft of travelers from countries surrounding Khazaria. The Bolsheviks are what were used to move in and terrorize the Russians, and the Bolsheviks eventually became the Nazis. This is all the work of the KM. This little-known fact explains the extreme violence taken out on Russia as long-standing revenge by the Rothschild-controlled KM. Remember, they hated Russia for invading their country, and they took out revenge during this, and I've got a little info on that. In a well-planned, savage, and inhumane bloodletting that stunned the world, the Bolsheviks were unleashed in full fury on behalf of the KM to gain revenge on the Russians. This had been planned since the destruction of Khazaria, 1,000 years before. The Bolsheviks, at the direction of the Rothschild KM, raped, tortured, and mass murdered approximately 100 million Russians, including women, children, and infants. Some of the torture and bloodletting was so extreme, we are not going to mention it here in this article, but readers who want to know can do some in-depth internet research on the Red Terror or the Bolshevik Cheka, or watch the classic movie, The Chekist, which is available on YouTube. I watched it as well as I gathered information, and this is what I found out. This is bad. Get your kids out of the room. Get your kids out of the earshot. The Red Terror took place during Russian Revolution in 1917 and to 1923. Felix Dzerzhinsky, I think, of the secret police enforced it. Oddly, check this out. He initiated a vast orphanage program during his leadership. What do orphanages do? They collect children. What does the KM Mafia eat? Children. Why was the Roman Catholic Church invented? As a collection agency. For who? For the Khazarian Mafia. It had nothing to do with the betterment of people. It had nothing to do with protecting the children. You've been preyed on. A massive police state was created which operated outside the law and which could arrest seemingly anyone at any time who was judged a class enemy. Looking suspicious, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and being denounced by jealous rivals could all lead to imprisonment. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? What they did, what the Bolsheviks did, is what the Germans did, is now what the American government is doing. And all the governments worldwide, they're all doing it. Throwing you out. If you don't go along with the COVID narrative, if you don't go along with the climate change narrative, if you don't go along with their narratives, you're out. You're out. You shouldn't even be alive. And it's the same threat that the Catholic Church gave to people. If you don't believe in this system, you're out. You die forever. You burn forever. You must subscribe to this stuff. And if you don't, you're out. You're in prison forever, meaning you're burned forever. It's the same fear techniques. It's the same activity happening. Imprisonment meant torture. Torture methods included pulling nails and fingers off with pliers, twisting, breaking, and pulling apart arms and legs, broken glass enemas, candles left to slowly burn underneath genitals, frying on a giant red-hot pan, boiling families alive. That happened. That's real. That is what Satanists, people who worship Baal, who worship Baphomet, this is what they do. They have no empathy. They have no heart chakra. They are working with the animal chakras, which are the bottom three. They are concerned with their own power and projection, their own genetic, their own life. This is what consumes them. And this is what they pursue, just like animals. That's why Baphomet is half animal, half human. It's not fully human. It doesn't have a heart. After World War II was finished, the Rothschilds came deployed the Cold War. And here we go. And used this as an excuse to bring Nazi scientists and mind control experts to America under Operation Paperclip. We're going to look at that in one sec. This allowed them to set up a worldwide spying and espionage system, here we are again with their spy system, that far exceeded any of their prior efforts. Under this new system, they continue to infiltrate and hijack all American institutions, including the various American church systems, Freemasonry, especially the Scottish Rite and York Rite, which you now know from Video 1 require pedophilia to become a part of, the U.S. military, U.S. intel, most private defense contractors, the judiciary, and most agencies of the USG, including most state governments, and both major political parties. This was Operation Paperclip. They literally, the U.S. government, literally brought in Nazi scientists who were doing trials and experiments on human subjects in human studies to then lead NASA, CIA, MK Ultra program, mind control. The experts from Nazi that ran the propagandist material, namely Werner von Braun, was put at the top position at NASA. Why would you put a top propagandist, a trained propagandist, who's a Nazi, in charge of NASA? Why would you do that? It's not because he has an amazing ability with a telescope. No, it's because he knows how to control mass populations of people. You simply throw the magic, the scientific magic coming out of NASA in front of the people, and they are spellbound, and they just believe whatever you tell them. So you can do things like fake a moon landing, and nobody ever knows it. Nobody ever knows you never were there, because you have a propagandist who is leading the effort. This all goes back to mind control, propaganda, and forcing their will upon the people. That's what this goes back to. Our system is bought. Look at these guys. Look at these politicians. This is artwork that was in Jeffrey Epstein's house on that island. That is mockery, folks. Look at these two paintings. The left, that's pure mockery. People died in those events, and they're making fun of it. And then you see here, this is a horrible statement to women. In this painting on the right here, with Clinton in the same blue dress that his semen was found on. This is mockery. This is mockery. They love, one thing you can always know, these people love to mock you and lie to your face. Just watch a press conference coming out of government. They laugh and enjoy mocking and lying to everyone at those conferences. You can see them at the press conferences that they hold. The Rothschild KM decides to mind control the American masses to make it much easier to manipulate them into approving the illegal, unconstitutional, unprovoked, undeclared, unwinnable perpetual wars needed to make huge profits and gain more world power, also known as the military-industrial complex, the MIC. They decided to gain complete control over all public education by setting up the Department of Education and creating globalists and socialist curriculums based on political correctness, diversity, and perversion as normal teachings. Now, folks, before we get into that, notice they did the same thing to the medical system. Remember when I showed you the video that showed Rothschild took over all of the educational institutions for the medicine systems and rewrote all the medicine books and put his petroleum-based petrochemicals as the chemicals used in medicine to heal people? You remember that? What do you think they've done recently with the Department of Education in the last couple of decades with teaching our young ones about their gender, about all of these sexually oriented concerns? Have you noticed that the curriculum is a little bit different now than it was when you were a kid? They have moved in. Normalizing perversion examples. I'm going to give you some examples here. Pedophilia is a sexual orientation, not a crime. Okay. Adult intercourse with a child is okay if it's consensual. Genital mutilation of children is now gender affirmation. So the same child that can't choose whether or not they're going to drink alcohol and can't drive a car can choose a permanent gender mutilation for the rest of their life. Do you see a problem there? These are all examples of normalizing perversions in human psychology. It gets worse. Check this out. Sin is a perversion of harm. Religion is a perversion of God. Hive mind is a perversion of society. Human sacrifice is a perversion of death. Do you see how they use perversions to twist the mind of society? To twist their will into society so that society willingly goes along with it? What do you see happening with the kids? Those at the top are the KM, and they control all the books, all the media, all the education that goes into the society. And if you don't know that, you will believe that education, and you will go along with it. And you will think, yes, it's perfectly fine for that child to choose what their gender is, but it's not okay for that same child to choose if they want to drink alcohol and to choose whether or not they want to drive a car. But they can permanently disfigure their body. Fluoride is added to public water and toothpaste, and dentists are mind controlled to believe that fluoride prevents cavities and is not harmful to the brain function or thyroid function. It systematically destroys. That's what they do in medicine with chemo. The addition of fluoride to the public water supply and to toothpaste is to dumb down Americans by lowering the operational IQ and making folks much more docile than they would normally be. Because, and I write this, because a self-aware, self-determined, self-empowered individual is impossible to control. What did I just say? If a person is not ignorant, if they're wise to you, you can't control them. if they're wise to your ploys, if they're wise to your lies, if you're wise to their cons, if you're wise to their Hegelian dialectic, to their dialogue, if you're wise to it, you can't deceive them. You can't deceive them. Because it's already in you. It is in you. The light of God, the light of nature, the light of love, the light of compassion is in you. You see? And so fluoride and these systems that they have in place are to dumb you down so that you're not self-empowered, so that you will not look inwardly to find the answers. You will look externally. You will look outside yourself to find the answers, which will never give you the answers because you can't find the answers outside yourself. They can only be found within. Programs to develop and deploy vaccinations are to dumb down children and create huge numbers of future chronic health problems. Food allergies, behavioral spectrum disorders, autoimmune diseases, lowered IQ. That's in your food. That's in your medicine. That's in your education. These things dumb you down, give you chronic health problems because you participate in them. And when you participate in the lies, you get sick, and therefore you're controlled. And I'm not shaming that at all. I'm saying that's what they want. That's what they want you to be like. They want you inept, paralyzed, prostrate, on your face. That's what they want, because then you're obedient. I wrote an essay on that. I'll release it one of these days. Part of this massive plan to dumb down and mind control the American masses was the KM's buying up and consolidating all the American mass media into 6 controlled major mass medias, CMMM, owned and controlled by their cutouts on their behalf. Again, here we see again, get a few cutouts at the top, control the rest of the masses on the bottom. The CMMM functions as an illegal news cartel, and it should be broken up under antitrust laws and for inflicting espionage and illegal propaganda as a weapon of war against the American people. Something to notice here in this graph, in 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 companies. Diversity is key. You want diversity in a society. You don't want a glass house or a echo chamber society. You don't want that. You want diversity. See, so American media was owned by 50 companies. In 2011, that same 90% is controlled by 6 companies. What's the program? Corrupt a few at the top, control the rest of the masses. What do you see here in our media? Our media is completely owned by nothing but Khazarian mafia companies who have no interest in your betterment. Finishing up now, in an interview, The Short End of the Stick, March 10, 2015, on YouTube, between Mike Harris and Gordon Duff, here's the address if you want to go to it and see it. It was disclosed from a written transcript of a meeting with Bibi Netanyahu in 1990 that Netanyahu was a KGB spy like Jonathan Pollard. Benjamin Netanyahu, Khazarian mafia head of state, said, and I quote, "If we get caught, they will just replace us with persons of the same cloth. So it doesn't matter what you do. America is a golden calf, and we will suck it dry, chop it up, and sell it off piece by piece until there's nothing left but the world's biggest welfare state that we will create and control." Notice the hexagrams behind Netanyahu. Remember what we know now about the 6-pointed star? It represents 666. It represents Satan. That's who this guy is the face of. He's in the club. Look what he said. Why? Because it's God's ball's will, and America is big enough to take the hit so we can do it again and again and again. This is what we do to countries that we hate. We destroy them very slowly and make them suffer for refusing to be our slaves. What do you see happening right now in the world? Suffering very slowly. They're slowly destroying the world. Do you see it happening? Do you see it happening? And look at the words. This is what we do to countries that we hate. We are the goy to them. To the Khazarian mafia, we are the goyim, the meat animals that are to be controlled, manipulated, and used as slaves. They're their slaves. That's what they believe. And so the point, and we'll finish out here. And so the point of all this is so that you know who the enemy is. Because finding that is going to do wonders for your understanding the world that you're living in. And with lectures like this, you will better understand not only who is running the world, but how you're controlled. And by knowing how you're controlled, you can cut off that control. You can defeat that control. Self-empower yourself to be free. Love you guys. See you later. See you next time. Bye-bye.